Hi everybody, I'm live from London, which is something I've always wanted to say. So my talk is on how to get into the music industry. I've never done this before, never done a presentation kind of this long and about this kind of topic, so bear with me. Hopefully it's not like super boring. And yeah, covered today, I'm just going to do a little bit about who I am, kind of what I do, my background and kind of career history. I'll be breaking down the industry, kind of the jobs available, the highs and the lows, the misconceptions, breaking in, and hopefully like a couple of tips on like what to do with like your CV or like finding roles, hearing about opportunities. A couple of tips that I kind of wish that I knew when like at the time, plus a little thing about like when you've got the job and like kind of now what, and then like a little page on like further resources and like my final thoughts. But yeah, just give me a shout if you've got any questions, or go through them sort of like throughout the presentation. I'm actually from Bristol. I know a couple of you are in Plymouth, so it's good to be talking to my hometown crew. So yeah, who am I? Who am I? What do I do? How did I get there? So I am Hattie Wynter. I'm the UK marketing manager for Native Instruments. I've been there for about 4 years. So I started in 2017. And I started as an intern, and I went to marketing manager over the sort of 4 years. And alongside my role, I also co-present a music podcast called On Repeat the Podcast. So if you want anything new to listen to this year, we'll be starting our second season soon. And I'm also part of the team behind a forthcoming music production workshop for young people, kind of aged between like sort of 13 to 25, called School of Bop, which is going to be sort of launched early Feb. We've got like a couple of panels and sample workshops sort of the end of Feb and early March. Yeah, that's kind of it. I mean, also just to make a note that I kind of started as an intern like maybe 2 or 3 weeks after being a student. So I've kind of been in your shoes. I know the feeling. And when I was a student, I studied English and drama at Goldsmiths, which is an art university in Southeast London. So it's pretty unrelated to music. I knew I wanted to work in music. A lot of people said, well, they asked me like, did you want to be like an English teacher or an actor? 2 things that I just wouldn't want to do at all. So I really liked the idea of like working in radio and presenting, which is why I got involved in the student radio station called Wired Radio. And I was a station manager there, and like also a committee member before that, doing like social media, helping running events, because I didn't really have any ties to music. So I kind of knew I had to try quite hard to get experience, because I just didn't have a kind of foot in. And then from doing the stuff at Wired Radio for sort of the 3 years I was at uni, I did some extra stuff with Boiler Room, like a sort of day, I think it was maybe like a 2-day kind of like workshop that was sponsored by O2 and Go Think Big, of like working in music and doing this sort of like task and helping them with a live show. I was a station assistant for Bellamy, which is a radio station in Peckham, and I also did some work for the SRAs, which is the Student Radio Association. Yes, I think so. Which is why I like made a podcast and went to field day and interviewed people. So I just really tried to get a lot of experience in. And a little bit about how I ended up at NI. I was writing my dissertation probably a little bit later in the year than this, maybe around like February time. I say that, but it was probably more like April, because I was quite last minute. And writing my dissertation, I saw that NI had an intern job posted online. I just basically thought I would apply. I kind of looked through it and I was like, I can do kind of a lot of that, or at least apply my kind of knowledge towards what the job was asking. And sorry, my camera just went off. So I just applied, and it was just an online application with like a CV, very like classic kind of form. Then I had a task and a phone kind of interview. The task was to pitch 3 artists that you wanted to work with and why. This was in 2017. I cannot remember for the life of me who I picked. And then also about how you would improve turnout at an event. So because I was running events with Wired, I kind of talked about like what I did to get people there. And I was also really keen on like improving diversity at the station. So I kind of spoke about that a lot with improving the event. So I kind of just put my passion towards the question. And then finally I had a face-to-face interview, and that was kind of just more like a meet and greet. And I think kind of in the sort of final stages, it's a pretty small office, Native in the UK, and it still kind of is. It's about 13 of us. So you kind of had to know who you're like working with, and if you get on, it's really a sort of career based on relationships. So it was quite casual and informal. And then I got the job, and just for dates, it was like my dissertation was handed in on the 5th of May. I got a job offer that afternoon, which was pretty insane. I was super tired. And I met the team like 2 weeks later, and I started working at the end of May. So I really didn't have that much time between studying and working, but it kind of worked for me because I basically couldn't afford to live in London without a job. And what I do now, I work in marketing. It's a pretty broad role with lots of sort of different skills and responsibilities, which is something I really like. So I get to do things like ideate on projects and campaigns, work with artists and creators and sort of influencers in their social media. I manage events. So the event on the left was called Bars, and it was like a sort of 400-person event at Barbican. And I also write newsletters. So all the stuff that comes in your email, that'll be from me. I'll pitch sort of ideas. I'll put creators into sort of like current formats. I work with partners. I do outreach and stuff like this, schedule social media, work with distributors. It's pretty much a little bit of everything, a bit of a jack of all trades. And if you don't know about NI, I just thought I'd put this in there. I'm sure most of you do. But we make complete machine and tractor, so something for sort of like the musicians and the composers, your beat makers and your DJs. We also are one of the leading music fund manufacturers in the world, just sort of hardware and software for professionals, amateurs and hobbyists. I think we're followed by around 1.3 million people around the world. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure I've seen that number floating around. And we're a global company. So alongside the UK teams, we've got obviously a team in Germany, the US, France, Japan, China, representation in Latin America and Canada. So it's pretty broad. It's a really fun place to work. Super passionate colleagues. And it's great because you get to hear about loads of music from around the world. So now I'm going to go on to working in the industry. I don't know if anyone's got any questions about like my background before I move on.
So Hattie, I just had one question. When you around the time when you were sort of applying for or reaching out to Bellamy and the stuff that you've done with radio shows, what did you just have this idea that you want to work in radio stations, and what was sort of the first steps you sort of undertook to reach out to these people? How did you know who to contact and the right person to find?
I think like Bellamy, I think at the time they were like just starting up, so it was just like the very beginning, and I think they just did an Instagram post of like, we need people to help us make the station, and I was like, oh, I can kind of do that. So I kind of just emailed them with like, I do this for Wired, and maybe I can like do that as well. It was obviously like unpaid, pretty random hours, so I kind of just took what I could get. But I think when I wanted to get into radio, I don't really know what really sparked it. I think actually deep down I've always wanted to basically be like a children's TV presenter. I think that'd be so fun. But I obviously didn't have any experience. I had no idea of getting into that. So I just kind of knew that going to uni and doing all the sort of society things would be the way to do it. I mean, I was pretty lucky because we had a pretty cool radio station. It is sort of filled with people that were like really into music. It was very casual. I think I learned that when I went to the SRAs, and people were very like strict, and they had like, you know, uniforms and kind of stuff like that, and they couldn't play certain music, and it was very like organized. Ours was very like casual. People were just doing kind of whatever they wanted. So it was just a way to just explore that. So I just kind of emailed them and said, this is what I do, and kind of got that. But it was just like a real luck of the draw that they were starting up. But I guess if there's somewhere that you particularly want to go and work at, just make sure you're following them on socials, like drop them an email. Most people's contact details are quite easy to find, and just kind of have a mini kind of elevator pitch with like what you do, where you've been, what you'd like to do, just that kind of thing. Okay, so I'm going to move on to working in the industry, the highs, the lows, the realities and the misconceptions. I should also say, like as a caveat, this is obviously from the perspective of somebody that's working in the more like business side of music and the more behind the scenes role. So hopefully there'll be stuff that's interesting for those who maybe want to be like producers or musicians, but it will be the more of the like, if you want to work at a label or if you want to do maybe something that I do, PR, social. But yeah, just feel free to shoot me any specific questions. So the music industry is obviously an industry and a business like kind of any other, and there's loads of different sort of roles that you can take within the industry. I've just jotted down a couple of places that you could look for work. You've got obviously like your record labels and your distribution, live events when they're back, and all the things that make live events happen. You've got your tour managers, your booking agents, PR, sync and publishing for like your composer work, your ad work. I mean, it's actually a really, if you are making music, sort of getting into sync is a really good way to make money. Studio managers, sound engineers, techies, you need all those people, royalties, legal, collecting societies, people that work for PRS. Those kind of things for artists are super confusing, but they're a sort of a great means, and you definitely need them, but obviously they're like a whole different kettle of fish. Again, you need producers, composers, songwriters, arrangers, mixers, masterers, all those kind of things. You've got digital marketing, social media, which is kind of the sphere that I work in, your PR, which is really relationship based, the same as AR and all your AR development. Then you've also got people like practitioners, educators, researchers, which are basically helping music sort of continue. So you don't have to think about maybe one role. There's various roles that you can take within music, and you'll come across all of them at any type of sort of industry event. There's also like specialists within those roles, so as well as traditional roles. So your specialist things are like technicians, your producers, your sound designers, and obviously traditional is like people like HR, finance, legal, which I think maybe on the sort of, I think from the sounds they sound a little bit boring, but they kind of help the businesses sort of like keep going. Like Native Instruments wouldn't really be anywhere without legal, HR, or finance. So they're in every single thing. And just for some stats, obviously these like are a little bit older numbers, so who knows what's going to happen with sort of Brexit in the year, but hopefully fingers crossed things will all be good. But it's a super important industry, music, culturally and financially. Like it made like 5.2 billion only 2 years ago. There's like an annual increase of jobs kind of every year. I think that's only going to increase because I think more people are going to be doing things independently. I think we're seeing like the birth of lots of like young or like new labels, a lot of like artist development ideas coming through. So I think there's going to be like loads of opportunity to kind of get involved and do stuff. And I think also it's a great idea to kind of make your own platforms and invest in yourself. So don't be too dissuaded by not seeing jobs online. You can always just make your own. And also because the music industry is so important, it can be quite competitive. And although it's like a super fun and creative outlet, a super fun and creative industry, it's basically still a job like anything else. You can still expect meetings, you can still expect reports, annual reviews, budgets, finance, data analysis if you're doing anything with social, if you're looking at like customer journeys, logistics. So like a huge part of working at Native is the supply chain. When all the factories shut last year, we're having a knock-on effect sort of in the latter half of 2020 and like into 2021. So you have to think about all of those things. You've still got to do presentations. There's still a lot of like traditional things that you have to do regardless of how like fun the industry is. But it is a really fun industry. And just a couple of misconceptions, it's like you have to be the world's best whatever to get a job. Like, no, I really think that good and positive attitude can go a long way in showing a little bit of initiative. You don't have to be the world's best social media manager to do the social media for Ninja Tune. You can only do one thing. You can only be a musician or work at a label. I don't really think that's true. I think a lot of people do both. From my experience, a lot of people that work at Native are producers and signed to labels, but they're also like software designers. It's quite common. I think there's something like 70% of people that work at Native sort of make music. So you don't have to just do one thing. You can obviously decide how much you want to go in either direction, but it's totally open. And you have to know someone in the business to get a job. No, you don't. You can make your way in, but admittedly, it does help. I've got a little thing about networking a little bit later on, but yeah, you don't have to know anyone. I didn't know anyone. I just kind of barged my way in. So the highs and the lows. So the highs, like you work with really cool artists. So like doing that thing at Barbican I was talking about earlier on, it's really cool to be working with sort of like huge names in the sort of like grime and rap scene. That was super cool. It was really great to meet them and like help. It's really nice to know that you're like facilitating their kind of workflow. As I said earlier, passionate, like-minded colleagues. Everyone at Native is there because they love music. Everybody that works music is there because they love music. You hear about really cool releases all the time. You are hearing about cool events that are happening. So it's just a really nice kind of industry to work in. You get to go to really cool places and events. I did like a 2-week artist development kind of like workshop at Dimensions and Outlook in Croatia. That was really cool. That was like, a paid work trip. Got free tickets to go and see Drake. All sorts of stuff like that kind of like pops up. It's also kind of nice to work in the music or this side of the music business because it's the predictable side of music. I don't actually think I spelled that word wrong, but never mind. So yeah, it's a predictable side of music. I generally kind of know what my schedule is going to be. I generally know, well, I do know when I'm going to get paid. I can book holiday in advance, you know, and there's not too many like crazy things that are happening. No 2 days are the same. I'm always doing something different. I think that's kind of the case for most roles in music, and I'm always learning new things. It's an industry that, you know, likes to have, or like likes to be looking at like new tech and kind of new platforms. But equally, a lot of those highs can be a lot of lows. So you can do a lot of long trips or late nights. Yeah, it was really fun to go to Croatia for 2 weeks, but I think I was doing sort of like 14-hour days. I only ate pizza and like not a single vegetable for 2 weeks. I was sharing a room with a colleague. You know, it was not glamorous. I think I went to the festival all of 3 hours on one night because I was just so tired. Sometimes really unsociable hours. If you're doing an event, you might be like working all weekend and then maybe take off the Monday. And I personally really hated that. So it was like, you know, my friends were not working weekends, and it was kind of like I left working in like retail and cafes and bars to not do that. So it can be kind of annoying to have that. It can be slow to adapt. I think rightfully so. A lot of the music industry is being called out for, you know, just unacceptable behavior, but it can come out really slowly, and it can sometimes be quite like slow to adopt kind of new platforms. Again, high competition, not only with like trying to get into the industry, but also with other brands. So because of that, you can have a really quick turnover rate of ideas, because once you've done one thing, you've got to do the next. You can't really like bask in your glory kind of thing. So it just can be like super quick pace. So it's kind of like highs and lows. You kind of take it as it goes. But I think overall, it's a good industry to be in. But I just want to be quite honest with what it can be like. So breaking in the bit that you're all kind of here for. So how do you like hear about opportunities? How do you stand out? So when you're considering your career and applying for jobs and looking at sort of certain parts of the music industry, just make sure you have a think about what area you want to work in, what you enjoy doing, and what experience you have. So I think what you enjoy doing is the most important thing, because if you're going to be working, it's going to be a full-time job. You'll be doing this like 40 hours a week. You're going to be doing a 9 to 5 in most cases, and possibly additional hours into your evenings and weekends. So make sure that it's something that basically you can stand, because other than that, you'll just begin to hate it and you'll start to resent it. Also, you have to work really closely with colleagues, so make sure that you're like gonna enjoy them, because you've all got the kind of the same thinking. Think about what area you want to work in. If you really want to be working at a label, then don't apply to be working with social media, because it's just not what's going to make you tick. And also what experience you have, just make sure you're leveraging like everything that you've done. And then hearing about opportunities, like loads of companies host their opportunities online. You can just like Google their website, go to careers, and they'll have something. If they're slightly smaller, there might even be like an email being like, just email us for opportunities. You can also check out things like LinkedIn. There's social media pages like Rootco. There's charities aimed at like young people, such as Youth Music, which I think is for under 25s, but you can probably find like other sort of music based companies that are aimed at people that are over that, if you are. But it's just a case of like looking around and seeing kind of where you want to go. And when you've found the job, how do you stand out when you're applying? So I was kind of doing this from the perspective of somebody applying to maybe work as, I don't know, like within my marketing team. And if I was looking through the CV and like the cover letter, I just really want to see that there was authentic interest. I'd want to see that there was relevant experience, and I just want to see that you had a positive attitude. So authentic interest, it's like, do you have a genuine interest in the company? Like, do you like native products? Have you even heard of them? If you're applying to a label, like, do you listen to their releases? Do you like their artist? If you're applying to work at a venue, do you go there? Like, have you been out there? And if not, like, are you willing to do the research about it? When I applied for Native Instruments, I don't make music. I'm not a producer. I just basically heard of Tractor, and I just kind of thought that I could definitely learn about it and research it, which I basically have over the 4 years. Do you have an idea, even a vague one, about what's kind of required of the role and what the company does? It kind of ties into the first one. If you're applying to do, I don't know, I saw like a job the other day, and it was like a sort of content in consumer coordinator. It's like, do you really know what that really means or what's asked of you? Just make sure you can, again, just researching what's going to be there. And are you interested in the job? Are you interested in the company? Does it sound genuine when I read it through? Those are really just the things to convey. Relevant experience. Do you have any experience of any of the responsibilities? Can you like convey that again in your email or in your cover letters, your CV? Can you bring a new perspective, expertise or niche to the organisation? When I applied at Native, I was putting on workshops for women in the radio team, because basically when we put on nights for students to basically go and get drunk at, we'd always have DJs from the station, but they were all male pretty much. So it's like, well, how can I try and fix that? So it was like, okay, well, we can do like free DJing workshops for some of the female students. So that was kind of my niche. When they asked about how I'd improve turnout, I just said like I would look at like improving diversity, and these are the kind of like learning points I have from them. And I also just want to stress that your experience, it doesn't matter if it's like paid or unpaid, how successful it is. If you're doing like a weekly live stream of like you DJing or something like that, you don't have to have a million followers or a million likes. It's just showing that like you've done something. If you've written a blog with reviews, again, it doesn't have to have loads of hits every month. It's not really about the outcome. It's just the fact that you've shown the initiative to do that. So I would definitely start looking at things like that if you've got any of those things under your belt. And initiative. So yeah, attitude. So initiative, basically what I said, if you're like running a small label, if you're creating a blog, if you're like hosting Instagram pages, if you've got a TikTok, if you're doing live streams, all of these things really count towards just having like a good sense of initiative and a can-do attitude. I really like to see organization. Can you juggle multiple projects, timelines, clients? So if you can prove that you can do those things, that's great. And then also just being nice. It's a really easy thing to kind of forget, but music is a really, it seems like a big industry, kind of like anything really. It seems really big on the outside, but once you're in it, you realize that it's quite small. Everybody knows everybody. Everybody that works at Native has worked at Ableton and vice versa. So it can get quite incestuous. And so it's really built on sort of like people power and relationships. So can you get on with people? Do you like people? And the same kind of goes for your course. I get it's, you know, really difficult because everybody's in lockdown and isolation. But it's like the people that you're sort of studying with could be the keys for you into the industry. But obviously no one's going to help you if you're not very nice. So just having a really good positive attitude is, you know, can be a game changer, can be the difference. There's definitely people that I've picked to work with just because they're so lovely. And just when you're applying, again, just like show off all of your skills. So include the links to your blog, or include the links to your live streams, include the links to the social media pages that you manage. Include like your artwork if you're doing like graphic design. All these things kind of count towards you. Include like learnings from them. As I said, it doesn't have to be like, oh, I got 1 million hits, blah, 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 blah. It's more just like, oh, I learned that when I do X, Y happens. When I post about my live stream like a week in advance, I get like 10% more hits. Just like really sort of basic things, but just kind of show like cause and effect. And also talk about things that you like about the organization that you're applying to. So if somebody wants to apply to Ninja Tune, it's like, oh, I really loved the sort of like Bonobo release you did here. I really like listening to the Spotify playlist you've got. Just show that you like know kind of what you're talking about and talking about with the company. Just have a little bit of initiative really. Hopefully that's not too basic. And also just whilst you're studying, just try and get as much experience as you can. So companies really like to see kind of like real world experience. That definitely got my foot in the door for Native, because I had done something alongside my degree, particularly because it wasn't really attached to music whatsoever. But it's also a really good way to meet industry professionals, improve your network. Networking is really important, and also helps make a name for yourself, and you can kind of add it to like your online portfolio and your CV. So just try and get as much experience as you can, and just keep building on that. And so I feel like I'm talking quite quickly, so hopefully it's all good. And everything you need to kind of know is in the job application. If you've got a job application in front of you and there's like a responsibilities and a role, everything that you need to know will be in that, and it's just a case of sort of answering it. And just use the same terminology to kind of tick off the application and be a stronger candidate. A lot of the sort of places like LinkedIn or like some of the bigger companies, I think Universal's like this, when you press apply and you've got to fill in the form, your form will just go to like an automatic thing that's going to like scan through and see if you said the same words as the application. So you kind of want to pass that. So I picked this random job for Because Music, which is an independent label for a digital marketing and social media assistant. If anyone wants to apply, it's still open. This is just something I picked up quite randomly. So it's like a good understanding of key principles of marketing and social media, blah, 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 blah. Key responsibilities over here. So like helping to produce and commission creative assets, take on day-to-day admin tasks. And then if you're just like scanning through it, it's like an interest in the latest consumer trends and opportunities. Just say that like you're aware of trends, or like you like to research trends. Those are kind of the ways that you can get through that kind of algorithm barrier. So social media and digital marketing, if you've been running an Instagram page or something like that, that counts. It doesn't have to be like super professional with this like massive name attached to it. It just all counts as a good thing. Like digital ad booking, content creation. Digital ad booking is basically like Facebook events, Facebook ads, that kind of thing. If you've got any experience with that, super helpful, but it's also a really easy thing to kind of learn about. There's loads of things online. So it's just going through and highlighting like any words that you can kind of put back into your CV. So it's just, yeah, super helpful when you're applying. Yeah, that's the end of that section. I don't know if I can bring this one back up. I don't know if anyone's got any questions about that. It was probably quite quick.
I have a question. Sorry, hi. With the kind of like showing experience, this is more for like the production side of it, the industry. Would you say that like creating a portfolio of like music you've made, or things like this, but have technically not been for something, it just uni work or just something you've done in your spare time, would you say that's usable?
Definitely. If you're like, I think it's kind of great to have a little online portfolio with like maybe like the brief attached and like what you were trying to sort of like achieve or what it was for. I think that's totally fine, and a really nice like easy link to attach into your CV. So that's fine. It doesn't have to be for anything. As I said, like if you're running a Facebook page, it doesn't have to be for a company. It can just be like your work or things that you've kind of done. People really like that, and it definitely counts as a good thing. Yeah, so definitely do that. I've got a little bit about it later on, because it can take quite a lot of time to kind of gather everything together. So it's a great idea to start it now.
Okay, thank you.
No worries.
I've got a question. You know, you said to show off, give links to your social media. I was wondering, I know it varies probably with each company, but how much reliability do they put that your social media is going to be matching what you're putting? So say like you're applying for a record label and your social media side of it doesn't show a lot to do with your music and stuff, but you write about your experience and that. Are they going to hope that your social media is good and that they'll judge you on this as well?
I think only include your social media if you have done what the kind of thing is asking you for. Like I'd never pass on my like personal Instagram, because it's just pointless. There's no need for it. So I only really pass it on if you've got like something that kind of references it. And so even if you want to start a small one that's just like, here's the things that I've done, like that's kind of fine. Yeah, hopefully that answers.
And also, so with that, as you have to do, say, stuff kind of online now and stuff, I don't know, so would they more likely, would it be more half and half, like your experience and whatever you write, and also if you have like good social media with what you want to do, would they also use that to amplify you getting the job?
I think it really depends. I think if you've got good experience and it's kind of like not anywhere, that's also fine. And I think in terms of like adding your social media, I'd probably, if you don't want to use like your sort of like personal social media, I would like then just make a LinkedIn and use that as your like online portfolio. And if you've got things on that you can then also like link to things that are like real, for lack of a better term, that will definitely be a good thing.
Okay, thank you.
That's all right.
Just a question as well, quickly, Hattie. So I often have students come up to me and ask when they're applying for certain roles, and they're kind of wondering how to construct their CV if they've got no experience at all. Would you have any advice on that? If someone was interested but didn't feel like they had any experience?
I would probably, I don't know, I feel like everyone's got a little bit of experience in something. So I definitely have a look at like some of your uni projects and see if they go towards, or like college projects or anything, if they go towards that. And then also just like show that you've researched the role and you're interested in it. And sometimes you might be able to find like who's hiring you and be like, oh, I really liked it when you did this. You could also reach out to people that are already at the company and like ask them some, what's the word, like for some information. And also just show that you've got initiative. That's all I'd say. I think it's fine to reach out without experience. If you've got some, it's better, but if not, then just like do a lot of research, maybe critique some of the things that they've done in a nice way. So if you were applying for like a label assistant, it's like, I really liked this release, I thought this was really effective, that kind of thing.
Great. And just on the back of that, what if the student was sort of really keen and hasn't got sort of previous experience, or I guess when you look at a job profile, it will have the requirements of skill sets that you require. And what if a student, you know, like it maybe said like 3+ years working for a marketing company, or if it's game for audio, having 3+ years releasing an AAA title. But what if, you know, they felt that they were at that level, they just didn't have the previous work?
Then apply, just apply, always apply. Yeah, even if no one's ever going to tick off like 100% of this profile or this responsibility. I mean, some people will, but if you don't, just apply anyway. Like that's absolutely fine. A lot of experience is transferable. So if you've done other things, it's really easy just to switch to something else. Yeah, definitely apply. I think I put that at the end. I'm just like, just read it and then apply anyway, because it really doesn't hurt.
Cool. That's it from me. Thanks.
Cool. Right, I'll keep going. So useful skills, what the industry is looking for. These are kind of just like my kind of predictions. And again, if somebody is planning to work with me, so like trend spotting and forecasting, are you listening to music? Who's going to be really big in summer? What are people going to be doing? Digital and online platform know-how. I think as social media changes, if you know about things like Twitch, TikTok, Clubhouse, always like good pluses. Adaptable and creative formats. If you've got ideas to do like face-to-face events, that's really cool. If you can then adapt that so that it works as an online thing, as everything's a little bit crazy at the moment, that's also a really good plus. Collaborative team player. These are kind of more like the skills that you kind of want to see in people, I guess. So collaborative team player, have you worked with people? Visually minded. I think if you can kind of know your way around things like Photoshop and Illustrator and Canva, it's also really good. I've basically taught myself those platforms because although you might be working with designers in some of your roles, you just want to be able to at least do a very basic mock-up. I mean, I still get people that are like, oh, can you rotate this PDF? So even that helps. And then just experience minded. I think when everything's back to normal, people are really going to be interested in like going out and partying and having experiences. So if you can think about like giving people nice experiences, obviously depending on the role that you're going for, those are going to be positives. And in terms of, sorry, my phone's just going off. In terms of like looking at things like Photoshop, digital platform know-how, there's loads of online there's loads of online videos and sort of like workshops you can do. YouTube's been a great help. Trend spotting, there's a thing called like Google Trends, and you can just like put in things and it will tell you like whether they're spiking or not. So just like have a little bit of a play on the internet and see what you can find out. Any questions about that? No?
What was the Google thing you just said?
I think it's called Google Trends off the top of my head. And it will just show you kind of like what's trending, and you can just kind of like search random keywords and just kind of see what's going on. And that's like, again, going back to that job profile, it's like consumer behavior. Like if you just kind of look at Google Trends, that's a point of consumer behavior. So you can kind of back it up on things like that.
Cool, cheers.
Networking, will it help, and how to do it? It will help. I will talk about it. So knowing people in the industry can be super beneficial. It's not the be all and end all, but basically I was thinking about this, and nepotism happens when you need something done quite quickly. I think this happens a lot with freelance roles. If I think about things at Native, it's like, we need some graphics done for some social media next week. Do you really want to do a massive call out when you have to go through everyone's CV? Or is it just like, oh, so-and-so in the company knows so-and-so, And because you like so-and-so, so-and-so will be good. Do you know what I mean? So you really want to be that person that's thought of if like this kind of role comes up. So that's kind of basically how nepotism works. But it's really hard to network at the best of times. So I think right now, use digital platforms to your advantage. This is a little bit of an ode to LinkedIn, but hopefully you'll see where I'm going. So if there's somewhere that you really particularly want to work, like Ninja Tune, I spoke about Ninja Tune a lot. I think I've been listening to quite a lot of their music at the moment. Someone like LinkedIn is great because you can just like type in, I mean, mostly they have to be like a slightly bigger player, but you can type in the company, you can find out the people, you can find out who works there. You can also see if they've got jobs, but you can just type people. Then you get a list of everyone that works there that's on LinkedIn. You've got their titles, you've got that, you can go then click into their profiles, obviously, and see like where they've worked. So like this has got people that are product managers, digital marketing, content editors, A&R and A&R. And you can just like have a look and see what they've done. You can have a look at their work history. You can kind of use that as a bit of a template if you particularly like their work. And you can just connect with them. You can just send them a message being like, hey, I really liked this, blah, 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 or I've got some questions about this. Do you mind if you answer a few questions? You might not get an answer, but I'm sure that if you message like 10 people, you'll get one of them. And it just might be super helpful to have people like that. And then you can just start building relationships, and you can just be like, oh, I'd love to work at Ninja Tune. I really want to work in the AR department. Like, do you have any tips? Or like, what's been your sort of favorite thing of working there, or what do you think is one thing people should concentrate on? Those kind of like, LinkedIn is a really good sort of tool for that. So I definitely say that that's something that you could be doing in the sort of spare time. Also, yeah, LinkedIn, as much as it's like quite cheesy, it's really good to kind of see who's in the industry and who's kind of also like active in the industry. So definitely make one of those if you haven't got one. And that can also work as a really nice online portfolio. And you can just connect with all your pals, which is cool. And you've got the job. Now what? Oops. So you can just wait, yeah. So when you've got the job, just make sure that you ask questions and you get to know the roles in your company. You can find out more about things that are going on in the industry. If you talk to people that are outside of your department, you can get involved in different projects. I've tried to like take on lots of varied projects working at Native, because you never really know where they're going to end up. And also your colleagues also have a really interesting work history. A lot of the people that work at Native have worked at places, like I said, Ableton, Sibelius. If they're in like the marketing department, they've worked at PR agencies. You can really find out a lot about the industry. And kind of what we were saying about an online portfolio, just make a portfolio of your work. So keep a note of it, include it in your LinkedIn profile, keep your CV up to date. It's super, I haven't done this, and I think it's one of my biggest regrets. I think I remember my manager saying this to me, and like when I first started, and he was like, just make sure you keep a note. I didn't do that. And now it's really hard to kind of go through and think about what I've done in the past. It's also then really useful if you're going towards, say you've like been working somewhere for 6 months and you see another job, and it's like, have you done this, this and this? If you've just got everything you've done in one place, you can be like, yes, I totally have. So that's super useful. So definitely go and do that. Yeah, I think that's it. And these are my final thoughts. Hopefully you've enjoyed this so far. So yeah, don't take it personally if people don't get back to you, and also just don't hound people. You want to leave a good impression, not an annoying one. People are really busy. Things are a bit crazy at the moment, but if you message 10 people, you'll probably get at least one reply. But just obviously make sure it's not copy and paste. Like, have a look about what they've actually done, get to know their title, ask questions. People will like that. People really like talking about themselves. And I think also people kind of behind the music, or in like the maybe slightly more niche roles, don't really get asked so many things. If you see a job description that you feel that you can't do, but you really like the look of, then like use that checklist or use that profile as a checklist for going forward. So if it's like, you must be able to use this, this and this, or do this, this and this, use that as something that you want to learn in over the next 6 months or into like your next job role. But as I said, just apply anyway, because you never know. And when you also start going to interviews, make sure that you add your interviewer on LinkedIn if you can, or like ask if you can. Also ask for feedback, check in semi-regularly. I don't think there's anything wrong with sort of messaging every 6 months, being like, hey, how's it going? Blah, 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 blah. Please think about me for future opportunities. There's nothing wrong with that. Also follow their career. If you've had a really good interview with someone and there was just a slightly better candidate, but they really liked you, that interviewer could then leave and go somewhere else. And maybe they'll think about you like the first time if you're just in the right spot at the right time. Also follow the company on LinkedIn, or like keep an eye on like who they did hire, because then you can compare your profile to theirs and like be proactive. There's lots of jobs out there, you just have to seek them out. But if not, yeah, just make your own whilst things are quiet. Do whatever you want to do, but just do it for yourself, and like show that you can then show that you've done that. A couple of places to look for opportunities, obviously the company websites, LinkedIn. Again, a note to LinkedIn, it's a very useful tool, I've got to say. Places like the Dots, which is like a LinkedIn but maybe more for like creative industries, youth music. Again, if you're under 25, there's places like Creative Network or Creative Access, I believe, if you are from a ethnic minority background. There's Rootco, which is an Instagram page. They've always got like a weekly roundup of like more entry level kind of jobs and sort of internships going on. I mean, that's another thing, don't ever turn down your nose at internships, because if they're great, they're really good sort of door into the industry, but just try and make sure that they're paid. Doors Open, which is made by Resident Advisor, they've got, again, like a weekly job roundup. Your college, I'm sure, has like a jobs board, or ask your tutors if they know anyone in a certain place. I'm sure that they have a wealth of knowledge. And also your friends, family, and your network. All you students here will all be going off and doing stuff, so like keep in touch with each other and find out where everyone's going, and what everyone's doing, because those are the really important people in your network. And that was it. You can stay in touch with me on LinkedIn. My email address is my name, and then it's at native-instruments.com, but I'll pass that on to tutors to send on to you. You can listen to the podcast on repeat. The podcast is a little final plug, which is talking to more like producers, which might be more helpful for some of you. So yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed that, and just let me know if you've got any questions.
Thank you so much, Hattie.
Thank you.
That's okay.
Sorry, Hattie, I was just going to ask, how could someone, obviously, if you were in the role of the employer and you was receiving loads of CVs and applications, and alongside all the work that you already have to do, you're having to sort of sift through all these applications and read through them as well. So what can someone do to sort of catch your eye or stand out through those sort of waves of applications? Or
I mean, this might just be for me, but if I was going through applications, it sounds silly, but I think having like a nice looking CV is really important. For instance, my CV is like green and it was pink before. And it was like, I had my skills in one side and I had my experience in the other. So it's quite like a visual thing. And I kind of feel the same about invoices. So if you're doing any like freelance work, if I get an invoice in that's like, I don't know, got a little bit of color on it or something like that, I kind of remember that person more and it kind of sticks out. So if you can kind of like add a little visual element, but maybe I'm just quite visually minded, that's really nice. And then I think just like being able to show that you've researched the company, you've researched the role. I don't know, I think somebody said to me, they were like, oh, I really want to work in native. And I was like, oh, cool, like, what do you want to do? And they were like, oh, I just want to play on keyboards all day. And I was like, well, that isn't really a job. So you kind of have to know kind of what you're applying to and what you're doing. So just make sure that you've researched that really. If you're applying to do like an AR job, don't then be like, oh, I really love working in the kind of merch department and not seeing people, because it's really like customer or like front facing. So just make sure, yeah, that you've researched it and add a little bit of color. If you've got any skills that you can kind of, or any experience you can put like to the top of your CV or cover letter, then do that. But sometimes it is just a case of just getting lucky. You can always also apply and then like a week later be like, hey, I just want to check you've got my application. Thank people for their time. Like you can send people messages on LinkedIn, like don't be afraid to be a little bit pushy. Go to events, meet people face to face, and then if you hear about a job at their company, just be like, oh, like catch up with them and be like, oh, I saw this, I'm applying to it, blah, 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 blah. Stay on people's radar. And make sure you're following the company like on social media. I think I've applied for something before and they were like, oh, so you don't follow us? And I was like, no, no, I don't. So just make sure that you're like engaged with the company.
Yeah. And would you recommend students to reach out to companies even if there wasn't a job role going, just showing that they had interest in positions?
Yeah, definitely. Sometimes like there's not like kind of open job roles, they might be external, but if there's not like a suitable candidate, then they'll become open. And if you can be like the top of the pile or the first person that someone thinks of, then you're more likely to kind of get it. So yeah, definitely reach out and just, you know, say that you're interested in any future opportunities, particularly if you can find someone that works in like HR or the hiring team, which again, you can find out online. Yeah, super useful. I definitely think you should do that. Just people like to see proactiveness. So definitely do that. Just apply when you can. Good luck with everything. Being in your shoes feels really scary, but you're almost at the end and you'll all be great, I'm sure.